Beneath the glittering gates of Fairmont Crest, a storm of betrayal is about to explode. For months, whispers have haunted the Dupree estate, rumors of a secret buried so deep it could destroy the family's legacy forever. And now, in the newest episode of Beyond the Gates 2025, that secret is no longer safe. The truth about Eva's father is finally coming out, but it's not what anyone expected. As Leslie and Carlton hold the key to a revelation powerful enough to shatter alliances and ignite revenge, every smile hides a lie, and every act of loyalty masks a motive. This isn't just another family drama, it's the unraveling of a dynasty built on deceit. Get ready, because what's about to be revealed will change everything you thought you knew about the Dupree family, forever. In the quiet mansion of Fairmont Crest, where the afternoon light shattered into shards across the tall panes of glass, everything seemed to hold its breath as if bracing for an imminent tremor. The truth about Eva's father was no longer a rumor, it threaded through every corridor and past every ancestral portrait on the Dupree walls. And the two people who held the key to that truth, Leslie and Carlton, both understood that once it was spoken aloud, not only Eva but the entire lineage would be irreversibly altered. Carlton sat alone in the room that once belonged to the Dupree patriarch, surrounded by old files, ledgers, recordings, and sealed envelopes that barricaded the memory of what he had tried to forget. He had spent a lifetime under a veneer of propriety, crafting the image of a man loyal to the Dupree name, a model counselor, but beneath it pulsed a primal fear, the fear that everything he had secured was founded on a lie. Leslie, meanwhile, wore a different kind of anxiety, the kind reserved for those who know too much. She was not anyone's enemy, and yet by choosing silence for years, she had become an accomplice. Those long nights at the Dupree Foundation office had shown her far too much. Quietly moved funds, altered DNA reports, and a chain of coded messages between Carlton and Anita from years ago. She told herself the truth would stay buried forever, until she watched Eva becoming the newest pawn in a political game the family had perfected. Leslie's anger did not explode outward, it burned with the discipline of a strategic mind. She knew Carlton had used his position to protect the secret of Eva's parentage, and perhaps even left an innocent person carrying guilt to preserve the Dupree reputation. If she exposed this, everything she had built in Fairmont Crest would collapse. She would be branded a traitor. Carlton stood on a border between guilt and survival. Years ago, he had an ill-fated liaison with Eva's mother, a woman who worked for the foundation and later vanished under the smoke of a car accident that the company's records had conveniently erased. When he learned the child that came from that union still lived, Carlton felt more than shame, he felt an opportunity, a means to maintain leverage. Eva grew up within the Dupree orbit, unaware that the man who watched from a distance with careful, managerial eyes was her father. Leslie discovered the secret while reviewing medical files for a foundation campaign. She recognized the genetic match between Carlton and Eva, and from that moment the knowledge took root like a weight pressing on her lungs. She had tried to blunt the edges of the discovery, to cover her tracks, but Carlton understood what she had seen, and a war of silence began, a quiet conflict that cut deeper than accusations ever could. When Carlton realized Leslie was preparing to bring the truth to light, he returned to his old repertoire: intimidation, control, and the construction of convenient allegations designed to strip her of credibility. But Leslie was no longer the terrified woman who once chose caution. She knew that if she remained silent, Eva would continue to be manipulated, and the Dupree family would keep laundering their moral stains through the washed language of legacy and respectability. Her anger no longer registered as reaction, but as choice. She started to leak information anonymously to the press, raising public suspicion that the Dupree Foundation had ties to an unresolved disappearance. Carlton felt the blow land and understood that Leslie was attacking him from the shadows. Desperate to contain the damage, he turned to Anita, asking that she exert her authority to crush the leak. Anita, however, did not place her trust in him the way she once had. She knew he was hiding something that, if unveiled, could end Dupree dominion over Fairmont Crest. In a rare moment of weakness, Carlton nearly confessed, in trying to save himself, he only signed the first page of his own undoing. Eva, who inadvertently caught fragments of that conversation, allowed suspicion to take up residence. She rifled through old photos and letters left by her mother, noticing how Carlton appeared in images for no reason at all. Her hurt was seated in more than betrayal, it lived in the realization that her life might have been assembled from the debris of deliberate concealment. Watching Eva begin to pull the thread, Leslie felt both dread and relief. She wanted Eva to know, yet feared that knowing would break her. Carlton, meanwhile, drew on grimmer tactics, enticements, hush money, a blueprint of blame to paint Leslie as the arsonist of familial trust. The more she fought, the more isolated she became. No one believed her except her conscience, wounded, stubborn, and all that she had left. A crisis meeting at the Dupree Foundation convened, Anita demanding that Carlton present the final truth about the rumors. He understood that admitting reality would strip everything from him. But if he kept lying, Eva would sink further into the whirlpool he had set spinning. The internal tearing threatened to buckle him. Leslie, seated at the far end of the table, watched with an ice-calm gaze that held its own history of hurt. Once, she had admired Carlton like a father, now the feeling resembled a scar that sometimes still burned. As Carlton prepared to speak, Eva entered with lab results she had commissioned on her own. Silence shouldered through the room. Carlton did not need to read the page to know its verdict. The truth could no longer be kept in the dark, and the cost of revealing it was already too high. Leslie felt no triumph in this, only an echoing emptiness. In this game of power, no one had won, only institutions had fed, only bloodlines had been bartered. The question hung, sharpened and invasive: could Eva forgive a father who had orchestrated her life from behind a scrim of deception, or would she mutate into the very heir that the Dupree machine demanded, a hardened custodian of lies, wielding pain the way her elders had taught? The days that followed did not rush toward resolution, they drifted like smoke clinging to fabric long after the fire. Anita, calculating and uncharacteristically quiet, began to audit the Foundation's books herself, turning up transfers labeled in euphemisms and small charities that did not exist. The facade of stewardship began to fracture into hairline cracks that widened whenever the press called or a board member asked an innocent question. The calm Anita projected evolved into something colder, a reassessment of every promise Carlton had ever made, every document he had asked her to sign, every night he had insisted there was nothing to worry about. Eva moved through the mansion like a ghost in her own story. She found proof of small, consistent intrusions in her life. Appointments that had been rescheduled without explanation, education grants that appeared because someone believed in her potential, opportunities that materialized at the exact moment she might have tried to walk away from the family that allegedly supported her. Each generous act revealed itself as authorization stamped by a man who refused to give her the dignity of consent or truth. The betrayal did not declare itself in a single cry, it spread through her like an illness, annexing the memories that once held light. She caught herself wondering who her mother really had been outside the edited version preserved by Foundation brochures. She pictured the night of the accident, the unanswered phone call, the absence explained as fate and nothing more. She began to ask whether a tragedy had been curated as cover, and if so, by whom, and how far the guilt ran. Leslie remained the one person who could not retreat into comfortable denial. Press calls found her, lawyers threatened her, allies vanished. Yet she kept a file that grew thicker by the day, documents no longer forged or cut to preserve reputations, but gathered to map accountability. She was not naive about the cost. She had once chosen silence because she knew the ferocity of the Dupree defense. But a threshold had been crossed, silence was now complicity. Carlton, cornered by the circle he had drawn around himself, considered outcomes that would have shocked him a decade earlier. He made lists that reduced people to liabilities and contingencies. He convinced himself that sacrifice could be noble if it preserved the institution that had enriched so many. He rehearsed speeches about protecting Eva from the world's cruelty when the cruelty he feared most was the truth that would return her autonomy. Anita watched him with the kind of understanding that endures only in long alliances. She recognized the rhythm of a man calibrating his conscience to the pitch of survival. The night before the board's emergency vote, a storm collapsed over Fairmont Crest. In the blackout flicker, the house felt almost honest, pictures dimmed, mirrors turned into dark windows. Eva stood at the threshold of the room where Carlton had once called the shots. She did not step in. She understood that entering would transform grief into a contract. Instead, she turned away and walked the halls that had designed her childhood. She wondered whether power could ever justify the theft of a life lived on one's own terms. She wondered whether forgiveness was an abdication or a reclamation, and what either would require of her. The morning arrived with air that tasted like metal. The board assembled again, lawyers in tow, reporters pressing their ears against the walls of propriety. Anita placed a folder on the table, thin, almost modest. The contents were enough to begin, not enough to conclude. It was a deliberate choice. She would not destroy the house without first dismantling the rot. Carlton looked at Eva, and the architecture of his defense cracked. He had chosen so many times to preserve the emblem over the body, the surname over the soul. The path forward had no virtue except its clarity: either confess and lose everything he thought he was, or persist and lose everything he still might save. Leslie's breath was steady. She was prepared for either arc: the confession that would make her both witness and executioner, or the denial that would intensify the proof she would lay at the feet of those who still cared about what was lawful and what was right. It was then that a smaller revelation surfaced, banal in its delivery and powerful in its consequence: a routine audit log, a signature on a custodial record, a discrepancy in a timestamp from the night of the accident long ago. It did not exonerate, it implicated differently. The secret was not linear but webbed, and a new strand snapped into place. Had Carlton acted alone? Had someone above him sanctioned the erasure? If so, who benefited the most from transforming a living woman into a story no one could question? The room inhaled and did not exhale. If this was the first cut of truth, it promised a deeper incision. The questions now acquired the weight of knives. Would Anita pursue the evidence even if it led to a benefactor whose money had once saved the foundation? Would Eva claim her lineage publicly, knowing that the announcement could reduce her identity to a headline? Would Leslie survive the winter the family would make of her life? And if Carlton made the right choice too late, would the one thing left to him be the one thing he had always refused Eva, that is, the dignity of the truth spoken plainly, without leverage, without calculation, without demand? The storm passed, but the air did not clear. Outside, the lawns of Fairmont Crest held their symmetry, the gates their polish, the facade its practiced calm. Inside, the gravity had shifted. The mansion no longer felt like a sanctuary but a ledger in which debts were finally being called. Whether repayment would come in confession or collapse remained to be seen, and perhaps that was the cruelest consequence of all: the knowledge that justice might not rescue anyone, that sometimes it only illuminates the ruins we were too proud to see. And as the lights inside the Fairmont Crest estate fade, leaving only faint halos spilling from cold window frames, viewers know this is not the end, only the beginning of a greater earthquake simmering beneath the Dupree family's polished veneer. Because once truth is exposed, it never goes back to sleep. Eva may have learned who her father is, but does she truly understand the whole story? Are Leslie's revelations only the visible tip of an iceberg, beneath which lie backroom deals and other secrets buried for decades? As Carlton buckles under the weight of his guilt, perhaps another force is already rising. A figure who has been pulling the strings from the shadows all along. Anita, once the emblem of power and integrity at the Dupree Foundation, now stands at a perilous crossroads. She can either keep protecting the family's name by burying every trace, or choose to confront the very past she helped create. But Anita understands that once the gate to truth has opened, no one can close it without being dragged into the storm. Leslie, after everything, seems to have won by exposing Carlton's sins, yet she has only stepped into a more treacherous vortex where the enemy is no longer the man she opposed, but an institution that has been nurturing lies since before she was born. Meanwhile, Eva, the woman who thought she had finally found answers, must face a more terrifying question: if the man she despises most once saved her life, can she live with that contradiction? Love has warped, trust has collapsed, and every character carries an unnamed wound. At Fairmont Crest, no one is entirely innocent, only some are better at hiding their crimes than others. And as the night wind carries the echoes of the past, the audience understands that the real war has yet to begin. A new secret is taking shape, another generation is preparing to inherit a legacy of betrayal, and darkness refuses to release its hold on the house. The curtains of deceit have not yet fallen, the sealed files are still somewhere in the foundation's basement, and another mysterious player, someone who knows even more than Leslie, is preparing to step into the light. Who will be unmasked next? Who will pay for the sins this family has hidden? And does Eva have the strength to confront the blood she carries, the blood of the very father who betrayed her? The answers await in the next episodes of Beyond the Gates 2025. Where every moment can twist fate, and every glance contains a threat. Do not look away, because at Fairmont Crest, every door that closes only opens onto another secret.